reached 1,000 subscribers. And me and my little buddy are so excited about it, we're going to have a contest to reward you guys for your support. So far, Petersen Games has created 6 figures based on the Starspawn species that Cthulhu belongs to. And here are images of all 6, numbered 1 to 6. If you want to be in the contest and get a free figure, post the number of the figure you think is the best here in this chat section, in the comments, and 1 sentence about why that one's the best. We're going to choose a winner next week, and we'll contact you to get your free figure. And this is the figure. So if you want one of these for yourself signed by me, comment in our comment section. Thanks. I have been invited to discuss some of the more abstruse horrors. So we're going to talk about a Lovecraft monster which is almost completely unknown to most people, even though it's really spectacular and actually makes scientific sense. Now, this is from the story, The Horror at Martin's Beach. First, let's talk about how this work came to exist and why it's so obscure. Lovecraft did not have a normal job. He was a freelancer. He made his money in 2 ways. First, most famously, he was an author. He provided stories to various magazines, mostly weird tales. But he also did revisions. Other writers would send their stories to Lovecraft. Lovecraft would rework it and send it back. Then that other writer would submit the story to a magazine and get it published. But here's the thing. Lovecraft didn't just edit the story, he made huge changes. He'd replot the story, he'd add new characters, he'd change the tone, he'd improve it. I've seen some of the manuscript pages that he so-called edited, and they are covered with notes, editing marks, paragraphs changed and moved around, everything. He wrote the vast majority of the final text. Now, because of his influence, he also added stuff like the Necronomicon, references to Cthulhu, all sorts of things. Let me give you an example. One of his stories, which he wrote with a guy called Price, is Through the Gates of the Silver Key. Lovecraft left Price, the original writer, literally with just 25 words that weren't changed. That's less than a paragraph. And Price was actually a talented pulp writer. He had lots of other stories. So that's how Lovecraft left him. You can imagine what it was like when he's working with Zelia Bishop or one of these other people. So most of the revisions still have the basic plot of the original author, even though he's fiddled with it. And you can tell because it's usually not a Lovecraft type idea. For example, The Man of Stone, co-authored by Hazel Heald, is about a wife-beating brute of a husband and a drug that turns his victims to stone. That's not really a Lovecraft Beyond the Universe idea. Though Lovecraft did his best to work with it, he mentions mystical formulas, and there's an old book that makes the character almost faint by reading a single page, and there's hellish ceremonies from ancient times, but most of it is the weird drug and family violence. I also should mention the supposed posthumous collaborations, in which August Derleth took fragments of stories or ideas by Lovecraft and completed them. Often the Lovecraft part in these tales was minimal, so in a sense it's the opposite of the revisions. Instead of Lovecraft changing someone else's story, it's Derleth changing Lovecraft. So anyway, there it is. You can find those too. Anyway, on to Martin's Beach. The Horror at Martin's Beach is a revision by Lovecraft of a story originally thought up by his wife, Sonia Green. She was an amazing woman, but I have spent enough time getting sidetracked. You didn't click on this link just to learn about Lovecraft's writing history. So in this tale, a fishing boat captures a huge sea monster. It's 50 feet long and 10 feet wide at its broadest point. It was a cyclops with one huge eye, had a fish-like head with gills, but its pectoral fins are arm-like with 6-toed feet. Or hands, maybe. So what is this thing? Well, first of all, it's enormous. This will give you an idea of the overall size. It's not as big as a blue whale, but it's pretty big. Here's a comparison with some other big things. So, yeah, it's big. Furthermore, it has one eye and arm-like front fins. Is this just an impossible hodgepodge? Well, no. In fact, it makes sense if we're dealing with a particular type of creature, and that creature is a lobe-finned fish. The most famous lobe fins alive today are the coelacanth and the lungfish, but back in the day, the front fins of these creatures were often quite articulated. Look at the front arms on this guy, Tiktaalik. It's an extinct lobe fin with fins that are halfway to being legs. And in fact, Eventually, the lobefin descendants were amphibians, reptiles, mammals, us. At one time, lobefins were a very important, even dominant fish type. Today, only a few are left. This Martin's Beach monster seems to me like another surviving example. Also noticed Lovecraft said it had 6 toes. Is that just him being goofy? No. Early amphibians also had extra toes. Count the little piggies on these guys. These are all amphibians from the Devonian, freshly evolved from lobefin fish. See how many toes they had? So if the Martin's Beach creature is descended from lobefins, the multiple toes make sense. And incidentally, the fact that it has hands but lives underwater is also not even a deal breaker. Scientists now think that many, if not most, early amphibians lived completely under the water, gills and all, and used their legs as paddles and to clamber around in weeds and stuff, not to walk on land. Now, since, as we'll see, the Martin's Beach monster was intelligent, it may have evolved its hand-like fins to manipulate objects. The description doesn't mention back legs, which makes sense for a deep-sea animal. In other words, the tail is propulsion, and the forelimbs are for steering and handling objects. So let's move on to the one giant eyeball thing. I mean, what animal has one eyeball today? Well, no animal with a backbone, right? By the way, there's some scary things coming up. You want to shut your eyes for a little bit if you're easily disturbed. Having one eye does appear as a deformity sometimes, so it's a possible genetic thing, but no normal species has a single eye. How would that evolve? Well, see, it's very simple. You see, our ancient ancestors had 3 eyes. I'm not even making this up. We have the left eye and the right eye, and then there was the parietal eye right in the middle. Now, in modern humans, it's turned into our pineal gland deep inside. Now look at these images. See the little black spot in the middle? That's the pineal eye. It looks kind of small, but remember, that's only the hole for it to look through with the pupil. I've seen fossil skulls with much bigger pineal eyes, and almost all of them from this early stage had these. Now, in occult lore, the pineal eye is associated with illumination, intuition, spiritual power, creative potential. It's the magic eye of mental abilities, telepathy and mind control and things like that. Now, imagine these lobe-finned fishes living deep under the sea. They're growing in size over the eons. They're becoming more and more intelligent. Its normal eyes aren't any use in the abyss. They would dwindle away and vanish, but its pineal eye might become very important. It still has to detect light at some point, which is what one of the main functions of the pineal eye, plus the mind powers and the other things. This also plays into a later event in the Martin's Beach story. So the pineal eye, it doesn't need depth perception in the depths, but it needs that eye. There's something I haven't told you yet. Now, in the story, they examine this huge 50-foot monster with science, and they say, oh, this is a baby that just hatched a few days ago. Well, how is this possible? Aren't fish babies really tiny compared to the adults? Well, yeah, but that's modern ray-finned fish. This is a coelacanth egg. It's the size of a grapefruit. At least modern coelacanths have really big eggs for a fish. It's not impossible to believe that our intelligent deep-sea coelacanth descendant, the Martin's Beach monster, also has very large young. Now, the adult would have been still larger. If the Martin's Beach baby was the same size compared to its mom as a blue whale is to it, then the mom must have been about 50 meters over 150 feet long. If it was the same size to its mom as a coelacanth is to it, then the mom would have been more like 200, 300 meters long, like Cthulhu sized. That's big. So the image I've got here is just the 150-foot one, but you can see how huge it is. So here we have a prehistoric monster. Well, not prehistoric, it's modern times, right? It has a single gigantic pineal eye, manipulating hands, and intelligent brain. In the story, an adult of these things tricks a crowd of people by making a sound like a dying scream. Its eye glows in the distance, like they think it's the moon. I'll let you read the story. I liked it. It's simple, it's really short. The enlarged pineal eye with its enhanced psychic powers makes sense in terms of the story. So, there you have it. I think the Martin's Beach creature actually evolved here on Earth. Unlike the deep ones, which I think were designed by Cthulhu, or the old ones, which came from another planet, Martin's Beach things only appear in a single tail, but even that makes sense if they're an abyssal creature from the bottom of the sea. Since it's intelligent and has mental powers, when it rises to the surface, it can clearly conceal itself from mankind. It's obviously big enough and fast enough to get away from one of our deep-sea probes, and it probably didn't have cities, so we wouldn't notice that. Oh, one more thing. So deep-sea fish tend to die when they're raised to the surface abruptly. You might know this. Their swim bladders fill up and they burst, but coelacanths didn't have swim bladders. They had lungs, which also functioned as swim bladders. They could exhale the air, but even more so, modern coelacanths, their lungs are filled with fat. As a buoyancy organ, they don't breathe air at all. They just use the gills, but they also don't rupture when you bring them to the surface. I suspect the Martin's Beach creatures were similar. I don't think they breathe air at all, which I guess in the end makes them kind of easy to get away from. Just stay indoors. Or not indoors, but inland. Of course, these creatures could easily destroy a ship or a whole fleet of ships. Now we have airplanes. Are those safe? Maybe, but their proven powers of mental sway might let them knock down airplanes. They may just be lurking in the undersea layers, trying to figure something out to eliminate the human threat. So there it is, a native creature of Earth that Lovecraft created in this one story, along with Sanya, that is pretty weird and pretty interesting.